Hello everybody and welcome back to Renaissance Bookbinding. Today we're going to look at how to make these false bands on the spine of the book. They're there to emulate old-time bookmaking. When they advanced in their style of bookmaking, these bands disappeared, but in order to evoke the feel of the old books, the authority of the old books, we started to make false bands to get the same effect. Now this book has a rounded spine on it. A little easier to do this with flat spine, some fewer steps. So I'll do this rounded one, and if you're doing a flat spine, you just don't need to do any of the rounding. It's much easier. Not that this is hard. So the first thing I want to do is measure the width of the bands. It should be the same as the hard spine. You want to make sure that you have good right angles there. You don't want your false bands to be triangular in shape or trapezoidal in shape, I guess. So here we'll get them nice and even. On this book, I'm going to do a traditional 5-band version. There's nothing that says that you can't do a 3-band version or 7-band version, whatever you like, whatever looks good to you. Go for it. This one is 6 bands from my Asimov book. And you notice the 2 together at the ends. And then this is my Norse mythology book. 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom. A nice broad one in the middle with the Norse rune, bordered by 2 other bands. You can do all kinds of spine decoration, and this is a technique that will allow you to do that. You can do raised letters, you can do sunken letters by carving into the grayboard. You're only limited by your imagination. So our usual cutting technique. If you want to use a 1 mil or 2 mil board, that's fine. You can even use pieces of leather. Anything that'll just raise that up. Now this is a Japanese pushing knife. You don't need to have one to do this. It is a lot easier, but if you put these on the edge of a cutting board and use an X-Acto knife, that will work. It will even work if you don't bevel the edges, if you leave the edges at a 90-degree angle, but it does look better, I think, with them beveled like this. It's a very satisfying tool to use. They aren't too expensive. I think that one was about 10 pounds. It's about $12 US. They're the right width, but as you'll notice, the spine on this version is bent. If you're going to try a bent spine, a curved spine, make sure that you're very gentle when you start bending your grayboard. Otherwise it just splits and comes apart. You want to do it gradually. I'm not sure why that makes a difference, but it does. Something in the makeup of the board is happier if you bend it slowly. Bend it too quickly and it just gives up. Little at a time until it matches your hard spine. Doesn't have to be perfect because we will be gluing it and clamping it down. Now this is the pH neutral archival glue. This is a book I'm making for my daughter, so I want it to last a long, long time. Regular glue, regular white glue is fine for 50 years. Won't give you any trouble. You want to be generous with the glue here, but not crazy. You don't want it running out everywhere. But you do want enough that if it separates a little bit before clamping, there's still enough glue there to have some moisture. Now I was going to put those right at the end. Just go for a bit of a wider thing rather than a traditional look. But I changed my mind. Thought, no, I like it better. I want this book to look old, and a traditional look is better for that. The actual band would never have been right on the edge like that anyway. It could be very close, but because it's stitching over it, it would generally be in at least a little bit from the edge to allow room for those leather covers to be folded over, which you'll be familiar with if you watch the Making Your Own Journal playlist. If you haven't, I think you'd enjoy it if you're watching this. And then you can add skills like this onto the basic journal making and make fancier and fancier journals. Or binding other books. You can print out a book and bind it. You can take a book from Amazon and pull the cover apart on it and bind that as well. And upscale your library. So with a band on each end, tucked in a little bit from the edge, one in the middle, and then one in the middle of each half like that, we have a good balanced look, traditional look. But especially because these are curved around the spine, they will need to be clamped. If you're doing a flat spine, they might not even need to be pressed down, but if you can just set a book or something on them, pop them underneath a brick, that's enough to really press them. Clips are handy things to have. You can almost never have too many clips. I'd better cover that glue. And while that dries, let's work on this leather. Now you'll notice I attached leather to half of the cover, just to the back cover, I believe that is, just to make it a little easier to show you how to work on the spine. You can attach the spine first, you can do the whole thing at once. It depends on what you're trying to do and what your preference is. I vary it up a little bit. I think it gets boring doing the same thing all the time, so I like to try new operations. So that's where that's going to go. I do want to have end bands and a bookmark, so I put them on. In a different video, I'll show you how to do that. But you'll see them there, the bit of red at either end. And there's a black ribbon bookmark at the left side there. So on our hard spine goes onto the spine hollow, which you'll also know about if you watch the other videos. And then we want to glue it up pretty generously again. You don't want it dripping down into the book, but you do want to make sure you get into all the little corners, because that is what's going to hold the leather against those bands and get that nice defined false band look. So our spine is nice and glued up with enough there that it's not going to dry immediately. We have a little time. So let's get the front cover covered in a nice layer. We'll get the leather on the front covered, and down the spine inside. Everything's starting to get tacky, which is perfect. And with a few last minute touches, we are ready to fold that over. Now before I put it in the vise, I want to put some grayboard on either side just to protect the leather from getting creased by the edge of the vise. I made that error in a few of my early books. They have a funny line down the side near the spine. So we'll avoid that with these gray boards. press that in nice and tight. Up she comes. First thing we want to do is get some of that tacky glue pressed against the leather on the spine and define a little bit where those false bands are. That's already looking really nice, isn't it? Now this is key. I'm just going to let this run and talk through it with very little editing. So you can see these strings going beside the false bands and press into that ridge, that little crack, the edge of it. Nice and tight. I'm putting quite a lot of pressure on that twine, pushing it in tight. And you notice the angle too. I go around the screw and then I go back so it's pulling the edges of the band in toward the center of the band from both sides, so it's not going to slide. That one could have probably used a bit more angle, I think. Now that I'm seeing it from the bird's eye view that you are, I would have given that one a bit more angle. But it worked out just fine. It's pretty forgiving, especially if you're doing rustic, older looking books. Here the gray board's in the way of the twine a little bit, and I want to make sure that it gets the downward pressure on the leather, so I just peel that out of the way. It's still protecting the side of the book, but it won't get in the way of the twine if I just break the edge and pull it down like that. We're already into the midst of the process with glue drying, so we don't want to undo it and move it. So it gets sacrificed this time. Okay, nice and tight. I don't want to pull the thread over the top in the middle because it'll make a little trench where I don't want one. So instead I'll tie it off here using that trusty little sailing knot right there. Quick, simple, does the trick. Now we have some time. Take the bone folder, get those edges pressed in, get the flat side, push the leather down against that tacky glue. Keep in mind too, this is a 2mm leather that I'm working with here. And a 2mm leather is a lot chunkier than the usual 1mm. It gives a nice, soft, almost plush look. Here I'm clipping to let the leather stick on the ends. You can see under my fingertips there. Ooh, very windy today. We get the odd gust. Feels like it might pick the house right up. Send it down into the sea. Here I'm sliding a bone folder underneath the twine on the side. The reason being is that even though you stretch it and pull it with your hand to get it tight, it's never going to be quite tight enough that way. So I focus on good placement and then I slide this up to the top, and that tightens those threads down even more. And after being allowed to dry, take off the clips, undo our little knots, and we get the very satisfying unveiling of our new false bands. Let's get that book out of there and have a look. Nice definition down the spine, softness with sharp lines. Really nice effect, ready for lettering, leather label, whatever you want to put on there. So give it a try. I hope you enjoy. See you next time.